My 17-year-old stepson stood in my own kitchen and screamed that I'd never be half the man his real father was, and I just smiled and told him that was fine, that from here on out his mother could handle every last bit of it because I'd already done my part. And about 2 weeks later, the two of them found out exactly what those words meant. And by then there was not one single thing either of them could do to take it back. And before I get one word deeper into any of this, do me a favor real quick and tell me where you're watching from. Drop your town down in the comments for me, because I actually do read them, everyone, and I'll call you out by name in the next one. It means more than you know that you're handing me a little slice of your day here. And if a like and a tap on that subscribe button isn't too much to ask, that right there is honestly the whole reason a small channel like mine gets to keep the lights on. Okay, so before I take you all the way back, I need you to hear one thing, because it's the thing that's been sitting on my chest for months. A couple weeks before that kitchen, this same boy stood in my driveway, the exact driveway where I taught him to shoot free throws when he was 8 years old. And he looked at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered onto his property, and he told me I was nothing to him. Nothing. Just some guy who paid the bills. And the reason that sentence could even come out of his mouth, the reason it landed the way it did, you're not going to get unless I take you back to the beginning. So my name's Dave. I'm 46, I've got an auto shop off Independence Boulevard here in Charlotte. Reynolds Automotive, been mine for going on 16 years now. And I live out in Mint Hill in a little brick ranch with a big pin oak in the front yard that drops acorns all over the driveway every fall and dings up hoods if you park under it, which I never let anybody do. I'm a boring guy, is what I'm telling you. I fix cars, I mow my own grass. I like the Panthers even though they break my heart every single season, and I never in a million years thought I'd be the kind of man who'd sit here and tell a story like this one. I met Renee 9 years ago. She came into the shop with a Camry that had a wheel bearing going out, that grinding howl you hear on left turns, and she stood there in my waiting room, worried sick because money was tight, and she had a little boy at home. And I comped her the labor because she looked like somebody who'd been carrying too much for too long, and I was right, she had. She'd been divorced about 4 years by then. Her ex had walked out when the kid was 3 years old. His name was Kyle. Hold on to that name, Kyle, because he's the whole thing later. Renee was funny and warm, and she laughed at my dumb jokes, and I fell for her fast. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't just fall for her. I fell for the boy, too, right alongside. Cody was 8 years old when I met him. 8. Missing his 2 front teeth, obsessed with dinosaurs and Hot Wheels, scared of me for about the first month because I was this big guy with grease worked into his hands. And then one Saturday I took him out to the driveway and put a hoop up over the garage and taught him how to shoot a free throw. And that was it. That was the whole ball game. After that, he'd wait at the front window for my truck to come up the street. Renee and me got married 2 years later, small thing, out at a little chapel near Freedom Park, and I stood up there and I made a promise. Not the one in the vows, a private one just in my own head. That this kid was mine now, all the way, no asterisk, and I meant every word of it, even the ones I never said out loud. Now, I never legally adopted Cody, and I want to be straight with you about why, because it circles all the way back around. We looked into it early, but Kyle wouldn't terminate his rights, wouldn't sign the paper, even though he hadn't paid a dime of the child support he owed and hadn't laid eyes on the boy in years. He wouldn't sign purely out of spite. And after a while, Renee said, "Let's just leave it. Cody knows you love him. A piece of paper isn't going to change how he feels." And I believed that. God help me, I believed that all the way down. So I just did it. All of it. Without the paper. I paid for that boy's braces, $5,400, and I know the exact number because I paid it off over 10 months. I coached his rec league and then his travel team, the Union County Reds, and I drove that boy to tournaments in Rock Hill and Gastonia, and one time the whole way to Myrtle Beach in July with the air conditioning in my truck, barely hanging on, both of us eating Bojangles biscuits at 7 in the morning in a gravel parking lot before first pitch. I taught him to drive in the empty lot behind the Harris Teeter on a Sunday. I sat through every choir concert even though the kid could not carry a tune in a bucket. Love him. I bought him his first truck, an old beat-up Ranger, and we rebuilt the brakes on it together in my shop on a Saturday, and I have never in my life been prouder than I was watching him back that thing out of the bay under his own power. 9 years. That's what I need you to sit with. 9 years I raised that boy like he came from me. And Renee, look, we were good. Not fireworks anymore, we were past the age of fireworks, but good, solid. She worked part-time at a dental office off Monroe Road up at the front desk, and I carried the rest of it, the bills, the groceries, Cody's everything, and I was glad to do it. That was the deal I signed up for, and I'd have run it back 100 times. Now here's a thing about the house, and I need you to file it away, because it's one of the pieces that matters most at the end. That brick ranch in Mint Hill, I bought it. Before Renee ever came along, bought it as a single guy at 31 years old. And then a few years after that, my dad passed, and I took the money he left me, and I paid the whole house off in one shot, cash, because I wanted to own something free and clear the way my old man always talked about doing and never got to. So by the time Renee and Cody moved their stuff in, that house was already mine, paid off, deed in my name and my name only, and I never once changed that. Not because I was scheming, I just never got around to it. And Renee never brought it up, and I think somewhere along the line she just started assuming it was ours. People assume things after enough years. She assumed a whole lot, it turns out. All right, that's the before. That's the life I built, with my own 2 hands, board by board. Now let me tell you how it came apart, because it didn't happen all at once. It came in waves, and I swear to you every wave was worse than the one before it. The first wave was Kyle coming back. About a year and a half ago, out of a clear blue sky, Kyle resurfaced. Cody had just turned 16, that age where a boy starts wondering hard about the man whose blood is running in him, and Kyle, who had been a ghost for 13 years, 13 whole years, suddenly decided he wanted to play Dad of the Year. Sent Cody a friend request first, then a text. Then he was pulling up to my house in this brand new lifted Silverado, black chrome running boards, temp tag stuck in the back window, and I noticed that temp tag never did turn into a real license plate, and I filed that little detail away because you can learn a lot about a man from his truck. Kyle was all sizzle and no steak. He'd blow into Cody's life like a July thunderstorm, take him to some steakhouse, promise him a weekend on a boat he claimed he kept out at Lake Norman, spin him these wild stories about his sales gig that was always about to be the next big thing, and then he'd disappear for 3 weeks without a word. And Cody ate it up. Of course he did. The guy who's there every single day, checking your homework and nagging you to take the trash out, that guy goes invisible. After enough years, you stop even seeing him. And then a stranger rolls up smelling like cologne and big promises twice a month, and he's the most exciting man on earth. It's not fair, but it's how a kid's heart works, and I get it now, even if it gutted me then. I tried to be the bigger man about it. I really did. I told Renee, look, the boy's got a right to know his father. I'm not going to be the one standing in the doorway blocking that. And she looked me dead in the eyes and thanked me for being so mature. Thanked me. The second wave was Cody turning on me. Started small. He quit calling me anything at all. For 9 years, that kid called me Dad, and not because I made him. He started it on his own around age 10, and it about dropped me to my knees the first time I heard it. And now, real slow, it slid from Dad back to Dave. Dave, can I get $20? You even hearing me, Dave? Like I was a roommate he was stuck with, and every single time it landed like a little paper cut, but I kept telling myself he's a teenager. They all turn into aliens at that age. It'll pass. He'll come back around. Then it got meaner. Mouthy, eye-rolling, dismissing everything I said before I finished saying it. I told him to be home by curfew one night, and he told me flat out I wasn't his father, so I didn't get to hand out rules. And when I looked over at Renee to back me up, you know what my wife did? She looked at the floor, started taking his side, smoothing it all over. He's just going through a lot right now, Dave, with everything. And the everything was always Kyle, and somehow I was always the one who was supposed to swallow it and step back and be understanding. I felt myself shrinking down in my own paid-off house. And I'll be honest with you, I went through it in stages. Sad first, then mad, then real quiet, and quiet is a dangerous place for a guy like me because that's where I start paying attention. Which brings me to the third wave. The one that broke the whole thing wide open. And I'll level with you, I still get a little sick to my stomach telling this part. It was a Wednesday night. Renee was in the shower and her phone was face up on the kitchen counter, buzzing. And listen, I'm not a snoop, I want that on the record. In 9 years of marriage, I never once went digging through that woman's phone. But it kept buzzing over and over, and I leaned in just to check if it was the dental office about her shift, and the name lit up on the screen was Kyle. Kyle was texting my wife at almost 10 at night. And I stood there, and every alarm bell I've got went off at once, and I did the thing I swore I'd never do. I picked it up. Her passcode was Cody's birthday, same as it had always been, and just like that, I was in. It wasn't one text, it was months of them. Months and months. And it wasn't quite the affair I was bracing for, it was somehow worse than that. It made my stomach drop straight through the floor. It was the two of them, my wife and her deadbeat ex, sitting there planning, talking about me like I was a checking account with legs. There's this one message from her that is branded into my brain, where Kyle's asking how in the world they're going to swing Cody's college, that fancy private school up in Tennessee the kid had been going on about, and Renee types back, and I'll clean up her spelling, but this is the meat of it, she says. Don't stress about it. Dave will cover the tuition. He always covers everything. That's what he's for. That's what he's for. And then Kyle types back something about the two of them, once Cody's off at school and the house is empty and quiet, and Renee sends back a little heart, a heart, to the man who walked out on her 3-year-old. And then, and this is the one that put me flat on the floor of my own kitchen, Kyle asks her, does the kid even care about Dave? And my wife types back, no, he knows who his real dad is. Dave's just always kind of been around. Dave's just always been around. 9 years. The braces, the biscuits at dawn, in a gravel lot, the free throws, the Ranger breaks, every off-key choir concert, the whole entire life I built for that boy. And to her, I was just always around, like the pin oak out front, like the water heater. I set that phone back down exactly where it had been, screen off, and I stood there in the dark, and I did not yell, and I did not cry. Not yet. That came later. Something in me just went cold and clear all at once, and if you've ever had a moment where your whole life quietly rearranges itself in about 10 seconds flat, you know the exact feeling I'm talking about. The grief showed up later that week and knocked me sideways. But right then, standing in that kitchen, I just got clear. Because here's the piece they never once stopped to figure. They'd built their entire little plan on a stack of assumptions. That the house was half hers. That the money was theirs to spend. That good old dependable Dave would keep covering everything right up until the day he wasn't needed anymore, and then he'd tip his hat and shuffle off quiet. They'd done all their math on me, and every number they used was wrong, so I didn't confront her. And I know, believe me, I can hear you hollering at your screen right now, and part of me wanted nothing more than to flip that kitchen table clean over. But I didn't. Because a confrontation just hands the other side time to react, to hide things, to twist it around and cry and make you the bad guy. I didn't want a screaming match. I wanted the truth nailed down on paper, locked tight, before anybody in that house even knew I'd woken up. So the next morning I got dressed, and I kissed her on the cheek like nothing was wrong, which just about took everything I had. And I drove to work, and I called a lawyer. Her name was Bev Costin, office downtown, and I sat across her desk and laid the whole ugly thing out. And Bev, who I could tell had heard 1,000 versions of this, leaned back in her chair and asked me one question first. She asked whose name was on the deed to the house. Mine, I told her, only mine. Bought it before the marriage, paid it off with my dad's inheritance. And she nodded slow, And then she said something that made my stomach clench up, because she said, "All right, but I have to ask you the hard part now. Did any money from the marriage ever touch that house? A refinance, a big repair paid out of the joint account, a line of credit against it, anything at all? Because if it did," she says, "Renee's lawyer is going to stand up and argue the marriage helped grow the value of that property, and a piece of it turns marital, and this stops being simple." And I'll tell you, my mouth went dry, because I sat there and I actually had to think about it, hard, 9 years of receipts running through my head. The roof, the water heater, the HVAC unit I put in 3 summers back, and where did that money come from? And for about a minute, I genuinely thought I'd sunk myself, that I'd handed them a crack to pry the whole thing open through. And then it came to me. Every big thing on that house I'd paid out of the business account, out of Reynolds Automotive, my own separate company that predates the marriage by 7 years. Never once out of the joint checking. I told Bev that, and I watched her whole face relax, and she said, "Mr. Reynolds, then in the state of North Carolina, that house is what we call separate property, start to finish, and it does not go into the pot when the two of you split." Renee had been living inside that house for 9 years, believing she owned half of it, and she owned exactly 0. Then Bev asked about the college money, and I told her about the 529 plan I'd been quietly feeding since Cody was 9 years old. And she asked me the one question that mattered: whose name is that account in? Who's the owner of record? And I said, "Mine. I'm the owner. Cody's just the named beneficiary." And she smiled a little and said then that money is legally yours to do whatever you please with. Change the beneficiary, cash it out. The boy has no claim to a single penny of it. $71,000, by the way. That's what I'd stacked up in there for that kid's future. $71,000. I'm not going to drag you through every dull legal step, but over the next 2 weeks, quiet as a church mouse, here's what I did. I changed the beneficiary on that 529 over to my sister's 2 kids, my niece and my nephew, split even down the middle. Because if I was going to put somebody through college, it was going to be somebody who called me Uncle Dave and actually meant it. I had Bev draw up a separation agreement, the whole thing spelled out, ready for Renee to sign, because here in North Carolina, you separate first, you live apart a year and a day, and only then can you file for the absolute divorce. I redid my will. Before, I'd left every last thing I owned, the house, the shop, all of it, to Renee and Cody. Now it goes to my mother and my sister. And I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy while I was at it. I did every bit of that, and not one soul in that house had the faintest clue. They were busy planning my financial funeral, and there I was, quietly attending it and rewriting the whole service. And the wild part is, the entire time, they just kept showing me who they really were, which honestly made the whole thing easier to stomach. Kyle started coming around more, sometimes right into my house, sitting at my kitchen table, drinking my sweet tea out of my glasses, telling Cody all about the boat and the lake and the big trip they were going to take, Renee laughing at his jokes, and me sitting there like hired help who forgot to leave. And one night, this man actually asked to borrow $400 off me, said he was in between commission checks. And I looked at him sitting in my house, eating off my plates, the man my wife was mailing little hearts to, asking me for $400, and I almost laughed out loud right there at the table. I said, "Sure thing, Kyle," and I peeled it off and handed it over and never asked for it back. Remember that $400. It comes back around in a way you're gonna love. Okay. Now we get to the kitchen, the night that kicked this whole thing off. It was a Sunday. Renee cooked a nice dinner, pot roast, the good plates down off the top shelf, and I could tell right away something was up because she was being sweet to me in that specific way she only got when she wanted something. Cody was at the table, and it turned out Kyle had been invited too, planted practically in my chair, and I should have read the room right then. Cody had gotten into his dream school, big private college up in Tennessee, the one he'd been talking my ear off about for a year. And the whole dinner, I realized about halfway through my plate, The whole thing was staged to hit me up for the tuition. $58,000 a year, and Renee slides it right into the conversation, all breezy. So we really need to sit down and talk about how we're handling Cody's tuition. We? And every head at that table swiveled and looked at me. The bank had walked into the room, and the bank was expected to open its drawer. I took a slow sip of my sweet tea, and I said, "Real even? I don't think that's going to be me." You'd have thought I'd flipped a match onto the tablecloth. Renee's face pulled tight. "What is that supposed to mean, Dave?" And I said, still real calm, that I'd been giving it a lot of thought, and Cody was about to turn 18, and maybe it was high time his real father stepped up and helped carry some of this weight. And I looked dead across the table at Kyle when I said it, and Kyle got real interested in his pot roast. And that's when Cody shot up out of his chair legs screeching across the floor, and this boy I taught to shoot free throws in the driveway, he looks at me with pure teenage poison in his eyes, and he goes, "You'll never be half the man my real father is. You don't get a say in anything. You were never my dad, you were just some guy my mom married. And you want to know the strange thing?" In that exact second, all the hurt just drained right out of me, emptied out, left the cold, clear thing sitting there in its place. And I smiled. I actually smiled at him. And I said, "That's fine. Then let your mother handle everything from here on out. I've already done my part." And Renee, she caught something in the way I said it, some final locked door sound in my voice, and the color just fell out of her face, white as those good plates, and she said, "Wait. What do you mean you've already done your part? What do you mean by that, Dave?" And I stood up, folded my napkin, set it on the table, nice and neat, and I said, "You'll see soon enough." And I went and slept in the guest room. And that pot roast was the last meal I ever ate at that table. Now here's where every bit of it came due, and I'm telling you, it did not all come crashing down at once. It came due one piece at a time, and each piece hit harder than the one before. First piece. Monday morning, Renee is at my shop before we've even flipped the sign to open, banging on the office door with the separation agreement in her fist because Bev had sent it over, and she is white, hot, furious. And she starts in on me, and then she plays what she is dead sure is her winning card. She says, "Fine, Dave, if this is how you want to do it, then I'll take you for half. Half the house, half everything you've got." And when I didn't flinch, she leaned in and got nasty, said she'd tell the judge I was the only father Cody ever had, that I promised that boy the world, that I owed them, and she'd make sure everybody in Mint Hill knew what kind of man walks out on his family. And I let her get it all out, every word. And then I reached in my desk drawer and slid a copy of the deed across to her. And I said, "Renee, read the name on it." And she read it. My name, just my name, sitting there all alone. And I told her exactly what Bev told me. Separate property, bought before her, paid off and maintained out of the business, never a nickel of marriage money in it, not one board of that house was ever hers. And I watched it land, watched the whole floor drop clean out from under her plan, because she had truly, for 9 solid years, believed she owned half a house she owned none of. She'd been a guest under my roof the entire time and never once knew it. Second piece, the college money. Cody comes to see me a few days after that, and he's not screaming now, no venom left, he's scared. Because the deposit deadline for Tennessee is bearing down and there is no money anywhere. And he goes, "Dave, Mom said you were covering it, so when are you paying the tuition?" And I told him the plain truth. I told him there was a fund, that I'd been building it up since he was 9 years old, $71,000, and that it was mine, my name, my account, and that I'd already moved it, and that not $1 of it was coming to him. And he stared at me, and his voice cracked, and he said, "But that was for me." And I said, "No, son, it was for me." And there's a world of difference between those two things, and you and your mother worked awful hard to make sure I understood that difference. So now it's your turn to understand it. I know how cold that sounds. I do. But I'd been treated like furniture in my own home for a year and a half, and I was done being furniture. Third piece. And this is where the whole thing turned all the way over. Because with no Dave money on the table, guess who Cody and Renee turned to? Kyle, the real father, the legend himself. So Renee gets Kyle on the phone and tells him it's his turn now, his son needs him, step up and help with this school. And Kyle says he'll come by, they'll sit down, he'll figure something out. And I happened to be at the house that evening, loading the last of my tools out of the garage, so I saw the whole thing from the kitchen, and let me paint it for you. Kyle sits down at that table across from Cody, and Renee's standing there with her arms crossed. And Cody's just looking at him with these big, hopeful eyes, the same eyes he used to look at me with. And he says, "Dad, can you help me get to Tennessee?" And Kyle starts doing this thing with his hands, this smoothing motion. And he says, "Well now, buddy, here's the deal. The timing's just real rough right now. I got some money tied up in a deal that's about to pop, but these things take a minute." And Cody says, "But the deposit's due Friday." And Kyle says, "Tell you what, let me make some calls. Let me see if I can pull a little loan together. I know a guy. Let me look into it." And I watch Cody's face. I watch the hope drain right out of it in real time, because even a 17-year-old knows what "let me look into it" means coming out of a man's mouth. It means no. It means he's already halfway to the door. And then, and I could not have scripted this if I tried, right in the middle of Kyle's big smoothing speech, we all hear it out front. This heavy diesel rumble and a truck backing up, that beep, 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 and Kyle's head snaps up. And he bolts out the front door, and me and Cody follow him out onto the porch, and there in my driveway is a flatbed tow truck. And a guy hooking up Kyle's shiny black Silverado, that lifted truck with the temp tag that never turned into plates, because it turns out he never actually finished paying for the thing. And Kyle's out there in the yard hollering, hey, you can't do that, that's my truck." And the repo guy doesn't even look up, just says, "Sir, you want to take it up with the finance company," and keeps cranking. And Kyle's patting his pockets like the money's gonna appear, and he turns around, and he actually looks at me, standing on the porch, and he goes, "Dave, come on, man. $400 would smooth this over. You know I'm good for it." In front of his son, $400. The same $400 he already owed me. And Cody stood right there on that porch and watched his real father, his legend, the man he'd measure me short against for the rest of his life, get his truck hauled off down the street on a flatbed while he begged the stepdad he'd called nothing for pocket change. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to say a word. Kyle told the whole story himself right there without me lifting a finger. Kyle was gone within the week. Ghosted his own kid the exact same way he ghosted him at 3 years old. The second being a father cost him something instead of just buying him a steak. Some things a man tells you about himself twice, in case you missed it the first time. The rest of it wasn't loud. Renee moved out, took Cody, got herself a 2-bedroom apartment over near the dental office, and started paying her own rent for the first time in 9 years. And from what I hear, it's tight over there. Real tight. Cody didn't make it to Tennessee. He's at the community college here in town, which is a perfectly good school. Nothing wrong with it. But it wasn't the dream. And the dream died because the people who spent a year telling him I was worth nothing finally found out the hard way what nothing actually cost you. I didn't sell a thing, didn't lose a thing. I kept my house, kept my shop, kept my mother's respect, and my sister's kids' college fund, and my own good name. And I signed that divorce a year and a day later without raising my voice one single time. And I want to tell you what it actually felt like on the other side, because nobody ever talks about that part. It wasn't some big victory feeling. Honestly, it was just quiet. The first real quiet I'd had in about 2 years. I remember the first Saturday morning after they cleared out. I made myself a pot of coffee, and I went and sat out on my own back porch in Mint Hill. And I listened to the acorns dropping off that pin oak onto the driveway, plink, plink, and there was not one person on this earth who needed anything from me, and not one person measuring me against a ghost. And I swear I felt something come off my shoulders that had been sitting there so long I'd forgot it was even heavy. I put my head back and I breathed all the way out for what felt like the first time in forever. My house, paid off, mine. Nobody's furniture. I still think about the kid, though. I won't sit here and lie to you about that. 9 years doesn't just click off like a light switch. About 6 months back, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't have saved, and it was 3 words. "Hey Dave, it's Cody." And I sat and stared at it for the longest time, and I still haven't answered it. Maybe I will one of these days. He was a kid, and kids get poisoned by grown adults who should have known a whole lot better, and some part of me is always going to be the guy teaching an 8-year-old to shoot free throws in the driveway. But another part of me is still standing in that kitchen hearing what he said, so I'm just sitting with it, both parts, and I haven't decided yet. And maybe that's all right. Not everything wraps up in a neat bow. I've had to make my peace with that one too. Here's the only thing I really want you to take with you, and then I'll get out of your way. You can hand a person everything you've got, your money, your years, every Saturday morning of your life, and there'll still be folks who go and hold up somebody who did absolutely nothing and use him like a yardstick to make you look small. And you're going to feel this pull to keep pouring, to keep proving, to earn a love that should have just been yours to begin with. Don't. Give what you give because that's the man you are, and give it with your whole chest. But the day somebody looks you in the eye and tells you that showing up every single morning counts for less than a name printed on a birth certificate, go on and believe them. Then get up, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and go sit somewhere quiet where the only thing landing on you is acorns. The people who are really yours never once make you audition for it. Take care of yourselves out there. I'll catch you in the next one.